Little Zoe never expected that her good deed, when she gave her sandwich to the poor homeless man, would lead to 2 police officers showing up at her door. Zoe's father, Charles, said to the police officers, "Sorry, officers, but there must be some misunderstanding," as he believed there was some kind of mistake, since his little daughter was no older than 8 years old. So what reason would the police have to look for her? But the officers insisted, and Charles realized he couldn't refuse the orders of the police officers, so he sighed deeply and let them in, then called out to Zoe to ask her to come downstairs. At that moment, she had just returned from school and was in her room doing her homework. As he waited for her, he faced the officers, crossed his arms, and inquired about the situation. He thought he deserved to know the reason, but the officers gave vague answers and said, "The less we tell you, the better." Charles didn't like this answer, and he was about to ask for more information when a soft voice came from the stairs. "Yes, Dad?" Zoe asked, looking at the officers with wide, frightened eyes. It was clear that she was scared by their presence. "Hello, dear. Could you please come down here? These men will leave soon, but they just want to ask you a few questions first." She nodded and stood next to her father, knowing that he would protect her no matter what. One of the officers knelt in front of her and introduced himself as Officer Craig, saying, "Hello, Zoe, thank you for talking to me." Officer Craig began by asking Zoe some questions about her way to and from school. It seemed as if he knew exactly the places she passed by, and somehow he also knew that she had given her lunch to a homeless man the previous day. Charles felt surprised when he heard this, as he had no idea she had done that, but he tried not to show his surprise to Officer Craig. After Officer Craig asked Zoe everything he wanted to know, she thanked him and thanked Charles, then left with her colleague. Charles noticed that the officers were not as happy as they had been when they arrived. He didn't know what was going on, but he didn't feel comfortable about it. Charles closed the door and went to his daughter's room, determined to find out more about why they wanted to talk to her. "Zoe, I heard the officer mention something about you giving your lunch to a man who lives on the street. Can you tell me a bit more about that?" He asked her gently, trying not to scare her or make her feel uncomfortable. She said, "He was hungry, Dad." Charles couldn't help but smile. He knew that Zoe was always a kind-hearted girl who saw the good in people. However, he warned her not to talk to strangers on the street and asked her to be careful. She promised him that she would be cautious. Naively, Charles thought that was the end of the story. In reality, it was just the beginning. When his wife Irene came home from work that day, he told her what had happened. Irene felt worried at first, but he reassured her that everything was fine and told her exactly what questions the officers had asked their daughter. Eventually, Irene calmed down, but she decided to take action anyway. The next day, Irene decided to accompany Zoe to school. She wanted to see that homeless man for herself and make sure Zoe wasn't getting into any dangerous situations. But she didn't know that by doing this, she was putting herself in danger, a fact she would soon discover. Irene woke up early that morning, filled with a sense of duty. In the kitchen, she was stirring the batter and making pancakes, filling the place with the smell of a warm breakfast. She poured orange juice for Zoe and set the table with a smile. This simple morning routine helped calm her nerves about walking to school, even though her mind was preoccupied with what might happen afterward. As they sat down to eat, Irene tried to keep the conversation light. "Zoe, who was the man you gave your lunch to?" she asked as she spread butter on her pancake, watching Zoe's expression, hoping to find out more about this stranger without upsetting her daughter. Zoe was busy with her breakfast and wasn't aware of the concern hidden in her mother's question. "Did you notice anything different about him?" Erin continued her gentle questioning, wanting to understand if there was anything unusual about this homeless man that might explain the police's interest. Zoe thought for a moment, her fork paused in the air, then finally said, "Not really, he just seemed hungry and sad, that's all." After breakfast, Erin and Zoe headed out to school. The sun was shining, casting long shadows on the sidewalk as they walked. Erin kept the conversation going, asking about Zoe's upcoming school projects and her friends. She knew how important these walks were now. They weren't just a morning routine, but a chance to make sure her daughter was safe and comfortable. Charles gently explained his intentions, assuring Edie that he was there to help, not to harm. "I just want to make sure you're okay," Charles said in a sincere tone. These words seemed to calm Edie, who listened more attentively as his initial tension began to fade while Charles spoke. The apparent understanding in Edie's eyes encouraged Charles to continue, and he began to feel a connection forming between them. After a few moments of conversation, Edie nodded slowly and agreed to get into Charles's car. Charles said as he opened the passenger door for him, "I'll take you to the hospital to make sure everything is okay." Edie hesitated a little, then confidently took a step toward the car, trusting Charles's promise to help. They both got into the car, ready to head to the hospital as quickly as possible. Charles drove the car quickly, his eyes occasionally glancing at Edie to make sure he was okay. The streets blurred by quickly as he made his way toward the hospital. Every turn and stop sign followed with precision and speed. At the same time, the sense of urgency was clear in the car, as both men understood how important it was for Edie to get the care he needed at the right time. As they approached the hospital entrance, Edie turned to Charles, his expression truly grateful. He said softly, "Thank you for helping me," his tone tinged with relief. "I'm sorry if I scared your family." Charles nodded, appreciating Edie's apology and acknowledgement of the situation. It was a moment of mutual respect and understanding. When they arrived at the hospital entrance, Edie received urgent care at the hospital after suffering an allergic reaction caused by Zoe's sandwich. The medical staff worked quickly to relieve his symptoms and provide the necessary treatments. Although Edie felt uncomfortable in the sterile hospital environment, he appreciated the care, but he was exhausted by the potential financial burden, his mind preoccupied with worries about the cost of care. Edie explained to Charles that he fled the hospital after stabilizing for a short period. His fear was not of the hospital itself, but of the costs associated with the medical care he received. Edie said in a voice full of anxiety, "I couldn't handle it." This revelation shed light on the reason for his sudden disappearance, clarifying his desperate actions to avoid debts he felt unable to bear. Charles learned from the police that their search for Edie was not to arrest him, but to deliver good news. They wanted to inform him about a new healthcare program specifically designed for the homeless. That's why they were so eager to find him. This program would cover all his medical expenses and aims to provide him with the necessary treatment without the burden of financial pressure. The healthcare program promised to cover all of Eddie's medical expenses, which was a relief he had never imagined before. The officers explained that it was part of an initiative to help the homeless access basic healthcare services without fear of unaffordable costs. Eddie listened attentively as the weight of his worries began to fade. When he realized this could be a turning point in his life, Eddie felt a deep sense of relief and agreed to continue his treatment under the new program, grateful for the unexpected support. He realized how much this change could greatly improve his situation, as he now sat in the hospital feeling calmer and more hopeful. Eddie felt grateful for the events that led him to this moment, appreciating the help that became available to him. As his hospital treatment ended, Eddie's health showed significant improvement. The proper medical care and relief from financial stress played a major role in his quick recovery. When Eddie left the hospital with Charles and Irene, he felt a surge of health and hope. His smile was brighter and his steps were more confident, showing the immediate effects of proper care and support. Charles and Irene took on the responsibility of helping Eddie navigate the complexities of applying for the new health support program. They sat with him at the kitchen table, which became a temporary office where they filled out forms and made the necessary phone calls, determined to guide him every step of the way. But Charles and Irene didn't stop at just healthcare. They also helped Eddie find a job. They contacted their friends in the community and searched local job listings, which helped Eddie prepare for interviews and improve his resume. Their efforts paid off when Eddie received a job offer from a nearby store, a role that promised stability and a fresh start with job security. The next step was to find a place for Eddie to call home. Charles and Irene helped him search for an apartment, drove him to viewings, and assisted him with rental applications. When Eddie signed the lease for a small, cozy apartment, their support made all the difference. It was a victory for everyone. He felt overwhelming gratitude, excited for this new beginning, in a place he could finally call home. Eddie's transformation was profound, and his presence became a constant source of happiness in the lives of Charles and Irene. Especially Zoe, who started calling me Uncle Eddie. He attended Zoe's school events and spent weekends with the family in the garden.